Sure. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Conveyor Cast, where we talk to business leaders about their communications. We want to understand how they use comms to build professional relationships, grow their businesses, and realize their entrepreneurial vision. Today, we have Greg Geehan from ScaleUp Labs, a Boston-based venture foundry. ScaleUp Labs was founded by a group of entrepreneurs who recognize that many talented founders in emerging ecosystems, think Poland, Colombia, overseas outside the United States, lack the support networks found in major hubs like Boston, where Greg and ScaleUp Labs is based. They then parlayed that or basically moved into from accelerators to launching a foundry with a strong expertise in AI. And today we're going to be talking about, relationship development for building entrepreneurial ventures. There's a really good comment that you made about systematic company creation when we were doing our pre-interview. But yeah, welcome to the cast today, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Quinn. Looking forward to the conversation.
So let's hop right into it. So can you tell me about the current iteration of ScaleUp Labs and the Foundry? How do you introduce people to what you are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of us as a startup that makes startups. That's kind of our background, where we came from. Our particular interest is in applied AI market first technology companies. And so we focus on energy, advanced manufacturing, and healthcare. Essentially, what we are doing is talking to our ecosystem that we've built to understand what are some of the market signals that we can use to identify where there's a big opportunity to start to disrupt, and then how we can start to create something that is unique enough and yet solves and creates some significant challenge, or create some significant solutions in order to create a lot of value. So we talk to corporates, find out what the problems are, what is it that they're afraid of, how is AI impacting their business, what's the market landscape around it. We get a lot of information from there. These groups can also potentially be the first customers as well as acquirers down the road. We talk to the technologies, like you said, we're across borders. So we operate across Latin America and Europe mostly, but we're actually look globally. We look at great founders that are everywhere, great technologies that think different. And then we talk to our Boston ecosystem, which is focused a lot on the development of the next version or phase of what you consider to be AI. And then we talk to investors to find out what they're looking to invest in. So we have quite a community around us. All of that helps us to identify what it is that we want to try to solve for, and then that turns itself into businesses.
That's a really interesting structure to think about, how your startup that builds startups really emphasizes a strong stakeholder network or ecosystem of people. Without going to that, I want to talk about sort of the way that you interact with each of those stakeholders, but let's maybe hone in on the actual startup building process. So can you tell me about sort of identifying the opportunity, the steps that you take? I want to emphasize the sort of systemic venture creation process, and maybe use communications as the way that you talk about these steps. Who do you bring in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have internally something that we call, I guess, Blueprint AI. And eventually when we get there, the whole thing is going to be a lot more automated using agentic AI, small language models, et cetera. But for right now, it's a model that we use to start collecting information and then bringing it through a cycle to systematically create a business by iterating on it, pivoting, figuring out where there's issues that we could really disrupt in, and then what are those technologies that can build it. In order to do that, we have a network of entrepreneurs, executives, and investors that we've built over an extended period of time. Years ago, my one company that I founded, that's actually one of the founding companies within ScaleUp Labs, is called AccelHub. And we had a group called AccelHub Venture Partners, where we found a lot of people. This was actually during COVID, so we brought it all online. But we had a fairly large group of investors, entrepreneurs, and executives that really cared about investing in Latin American startups. And through that, we built up, a group of people that would be willing to get on calls with us and be experts and be panelists and help us to figure out, once we had some cool technologies that wanted to enter the US, who they could introduce them to, how they could take them to market. On top of that, we've started a lot of companies along the way. And so when we talk to groups, we collect a lot of that information and see, like, what is it that people are really nervous about. We have people within our team. Some of it, everybody contributes at some level. So as we talk to these different groups, we do a lot of advisory work. So when we're talking to corporations, we start to see trends, and we can use a lot of our tools that we've built internally to start taking those trends and start to craft a value proposition around it. And as we bring it through our model, we can quickly create this value proposition, create a clean canvas model, identify if we think that if it's big enough, do some research online, but then we start to bring our network back into it. So we want to know from them, hey, what we just put together, does this actually make sense, or do we need to pivot it? And this could go through multiple iterations. Usually, most startups take successful ones 5 pivots before they get funding, right, and actually get the traction that they need. We may do 5 pivots in a week. We may do 10 pivots in a week, or maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks as we have these conversations. But it allows us to take the information and feed it back in. And because we're using AI, a lot of those things that might take a lot longer to go do market research, to do introductions, to interview people, a lot of those things we can create synthetic users using our small language models and other information in order to help to identify or create this value proposition story around the information that we're hearing from the real experts in our network.
And so when you are, let's talk about the difference between sort of a startup, let's say the garage, the guy in the garage type of thing. They might have a small advisor network, and they might have a hunch around what they're trying to build, and then they go out and they get out of the building, quote unquote, and test it in the market. Mm-hmm. Whereas it seems like there's a lot of co-creation elements in what you're doing. How do you separate sort of the driver of the venture, or is there a particular driver who is accountable for the venture? At what point do they, become that driver versus collecting feedback through the iterations? And I imagine you're putting a tangible product in front of your advisors versus a business plan or a lean canvas or something to that effect?
Yeah, well, it has certain stages, and this allows us to work pretty rapidly. So generally, the ideas come from somebody within the team. So we have a place where we store all of these, and they go through basically a ranking and a pathway. So the ideas that are starting to get some traction, there's a champion attached to that. That may be myself, maybe one of my partners, and maybe one of the team. But eventually, somebody's saying, "Hey, this is one that seems to have a lot of ability to create something that's unique that we can help with. Applied AI, decentralized AI. This next phase of how AI is going to be deployed and is going to really change industries. Do we think that we can create something that would be unique and is kind of that next generation of technologies that corporations are going to need?" Because we're B2B for the most part. Once we get to that point, we go into what's called a discovery phase. And in the discovery phase, we assign basically an owner to that. And the owner we all work cross collaboratively. Everybody has their different skill sets, but we want somebody who really own this all the way through. And that involves doing things like, have we identified a customer? If we've identified a customer through this, usually this is why we think that there's value in it, because somebody's literally said, we will buy this. And we've heard from some others that they also are saying something like, we would buy something like this. So now we have this kind of idea of how we can go out to them. So we can go out to them. We run a series of frameworks, usually pretty quick, a day or so. Could be a couple of conversations, but it really starts, what we can do is really quickly capture where in their workflow would change create impact, and what is it that they'd be willing to buy. That then turns into the user story. And we need something that is visual, though, that we can actually react to. So this could be something as simple as a deck. We take all the words from Lean Canvas in the value prop, put it into something that we can like kind of visualize. How is it that the end user is going to use this, and why would this be impactful to them? This can then go back to the customer that we've already identified and talked to and say, are we on the mark? And it's something that we can all see and kind of understand. That's when we get into something that's more of like the first case scenario. And this could be something, because this takes more time, where we might have one of our designers, somebody who's really good on the user experience, go out and create a Figma workflow, may create a mock-up of it. If it's something that we already have, like in one case, we have an augmented reality technology that we can put in market today. It's a hardware that's we bring in through our partners. We're building the back end of it. We can have them start to use it and collect the data that then allows us to create it like right away. So it's going to depend on the company, but it could be as simple as Figma that allows them to mock it up and see how it works before we put more resources into it to building the tech. It could be that we just put something that already exists out there and start collecting the data that allows us to get and go create the technology. But ultimately, when we go to our technology team, our developers, we need them to really understand what it is we're solving for. Can they visualize what it is that they're, not just how it looks, but as the user interfaces with it, how is it supposed to impact their lives so that it adds the value to it? And this is how we then take that, and once it's in that like kind of phase where we've said, okay, we think there's technology assigned to it, we have websites set up, we're putting LinkedIn, we're starting to reach out to our network, we're trying to sell to people that we don't know, even if it's just collect data, emails, things like that, saying I'm interested in this. And as this is being built up, we're trying to build up some sort of interest from the community.
Like a business case to the point where there's almost commercial, like there's commercials before building.
That's right.
I would say.
Yeah.
And one thing you're really talking about, which I'm very excited about right now, is the cost to prototype something. Like it's not even Figma these days. You can actually use Vibe, any of the cursors, or automations and N8N. I don't know if it's Nathan. I don't actually know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of tools that have made it a lot easier.
And so then the cost to do business is you need the creativity to build the thing at speed, but then the relationship. So where you have the corporate venture capital arms or, purchasers that you can show, would you buy this if we built this? Or, and then if you hear them say, give it to me now, then you go out and put it together.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so when you talk about how important is communication, right? It's like technology doesn't create value on its own, right? It's like a lot of the technologies that exist today are open source. Like every time you think about solving a problem, ChatGPT is probably going to release that functionality like in 2 weeks, right? They're always they have the dollars, the data, and the ability to deliver something that is open sourced very, very quickly. So the technology on itself is not the value. It is actually that community and network that we've built up over many years, and that's really our value that we bring. Is that when we're working with groups, not only have we done this before, so we know how to build companies, we know how to build them fast, we know how to build the technologies around it. We're going to be using things like open source technologies in order to create the business case, put it into market, get that constant feedback. And it's the data that you get as you're releasing it and getting this feedback from the community, from the network. That's where you're able to build the value proposition that gives you the ability to go sell it to customers. If you don't have that big, it's a lot harder if you're just a single founder looking to go and create something and you don't have the network and you have to build it from scratch, or you have a network, but it's small and you haven't built a company before. When you have all the pieces to it, it allows you to start getting something more at speed, and not just to get success. I mean, there's still a lot of risk in what we do. We kill stuff all the time. And that's part of the data that we get. As we go through it, we may make the decision to just kill a company because it's not going to succeed.
So Boston story, one of the fables or sort of lores about Harvard, I believe, is that Bill Gates, Harvard was one of two universities with a large mainframe computer at that point in time, and Bill Gates happened to be there, even though I think he left without graduating or something. But
after he started Microsoft, he left.
Yeah. So he was there in the future. People think of like being a part of a wave or like experiencing. My buddy was just telling me about when he first came across the first Bitcoin ATM, and that led to him being there earlier. And so there's these stories around the technology waves and people being in the future earlier than anyone else. But you can think of that as a learning motion when you're building something new too. So one picture that you've painted is that you have an idea of what the problem is. You identify a symptom of a problem with a corporate buyer, someone who's got budget, right? And so because you have that, your nose is on the trail of that opportunity, you have to learn and get a scent for what the problem actually is. And so in the same way that Bill Gates was early with computers that led to understanding what the future would look like, you can think of it as like a very similar sort of micro opportunities. You become very knowledgeable about what that issue is. It might not be for the entire world. It might be for one customer at the moment, but you become familiar with what that customer needs, and then you package it properly and build something for them.
Well, that's right. And, there's major issues that are talked about all the time. You can just use any Google search or use ChatGPT to ask what the problems are in an industry, right? It's not a secret. And that's not where, anybody can go and say, I'm just going to go solve this big problem. And I see pitch decks all the time. Being in the investor space, I see pitch decks all the time that just say, hey, look, there's this huge problem that exists out there and I'm going to solve it. And they paint this really great picture of how their technology is going to be able to solve some big problem that exists. And that sounds great, but it's once you get into the actual details is where you can understand if there's something real or not. First off, do they really understand the user journey? Do they understand the user experience? Most companies, if they try to design a huge, massive solution to all the problems right up front, are going to fail. You usually pick some sort of beachhead. What is the feature that is going to solve the problem right now as your MVP? The question is, are you solving the right one? Are you communicating, iterating, and pivoting in order to make sure that you're actually solving a problem that not just your early adopters, but lots within that space actually can solve for? So we're constantly using our communications and information to help us to really figure out, are we on the right track or not?
So I really, the way that I think about this is almost listening, right? Like communication's two ways, and there's lots of ways. You said you can go and research problems, you can understand problems at a high level, and there's lots of pitch decks saying this is $1 billion, recycling is a massive issue, and you can think of the macro system, but what is the next logical thing that allows you to accumulate resources, whether through a client contract, revenue, that allows you to chip away at that big problem. And so that's why a lot of big businesses look like really modest things when they get started, because it's just like a little thing that gets it done. One of the, when it comes to listening, it's hard to listen to two things at one time. And the way that you've painted this picture about being a foundry for businesses, I can imagine that even just, as a modest content marketing agency, listening to the right thing at the right time, or even just retaining the opportunity, while there's a lot of really great opportunities or just things that are happening. So with by its nature, a foundry means that you're doing multiple things at one time. How are you making sure that you are completely pointed and sharply pursuing and learning on the fly each of those things?
It's not easy, and we fail just as much as we succeed, probably more, right? And we try to learn from it. So there's two answers to that. One is, who are we today? We're also modest. We haven't been in this game for a super long time. We have a bunch of companies out in the market. We're still learning as we go. We're still building technologies as we go, right? So our ideal state is to build decentralized AI agents as well as small language models within all the data within that we ever collect, right? And PowerPoints, PDFs, text messages, emails, transcripts, all that stuff, and be able to mine it. We can do a little bit of that now. So some of it's manual. And what we do find is that sometimes we do get carried away and get emotionally attached to ideas that we think are going to be the next big thing, right? The last person we talked to, it seemed like it was a massive need. We're going to go after it. We're going to drop some of the things that had a lot of potential for a couple of days, right? While we work on this one. And it turns out that you kind of lose track of it. So what we try to do is, when you have a lead on something that we've all identified as the right opportunity, we have to shepherd it through something that helps to take some of that emotion out of it. And that's the data. And the data, sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not as good at it, but we try to collect as much as we can to help us inform it, including things like, how do we really judge the merits of an idea as it's been presented today? Not just where could it be in the future, but we will go out to multiple experts in the field, people that we know from our network, and we'll have them judge or rate certain aspects of the business to help us to create like an average number that's associated with it, right? Through different phases of it. And what this helps us to do is take some of that emotion out of it, where you're averaging it across, let's call it 10 experts, people that understand businesses and value propositions. And this helps us to give us a feedback loop of saying, hey, we had 3 people who hate it. We have 2 people that love it and 4 who are just like, okay, well, the numbers are showing it 5. Is 5 worth it out of 10? Is that worth it? Probably not. Is it 3? Absolutely not. Kill it. When you're in like a 7 and 8 range, it means that enough people have shown that there's enough interest in it and enough value in it that it's worth continuing to pursue through the next stage gate. Right. So like being able to put that in our structure and process really helps us to keep ourselves aligned on a certain vision, because we don't want to necessarily go like, we're going to keep collecting data about new stuff that we hear and it goes into a queue. So we know it's there. We can always come back and look at it. And then we can start to create these clusters around those to say, hey, we keep hearing this thing come up again. Here's like 3 ideas that could solve that problem. Now let's cluster those into one. And now let's bring it through that gate and get some ideas on. If it's not strong enough, bring it back and see if we can strengthen the value proposition. If we can and get that number up, then kill it.
So that's almost like a user group. You're talking almost about user group testing, or it's almost like an NPS score for user group. But
people who are like, it could be the customer, it could be people who are just operating the space, it could be an investor, it could be experts that we know through our ecosystem. But yeah, call it an NPS score for that particular deal. Like, how much do we love it?
Let's talk about knowledge management. So again, going back to this systematic venture creation. So you painted the picture, partners got a great idea, or at least you're shepherding new venture ideas. There's a champion at some point. You do a lot of co-creation and advisory work. So, and you alluded a little bit to using AI to create these like MCPs of just sort of unstructured, but the AI structures it for you. I love that stuff. Notebook LM is an amazing tool for what I do now. But if we take out the AI component of that, how do you think, or do you have someone on the team? Are you guys just really organized with like note taking and like keeping, because there's a lot of throughput cost. There's throughput cost in managing a large group of stakeholders versus being one decision maker and like ramming things through. But the benefit is just the collective knowledge opportunity of that. Yeah.
Well, we're not, everybody's different at being able to capture notes on different opportunities. What we try to be good at, and we do have a central storage system, like we use ClickUp to like manage most of our workflows. So when something happens, we're dropping it in and we're dropping what the notes that we have. But this is what we try to put into our process. So somebody comes to us, let's call it, I have an interest. I've talked to a bunch of manufacturers, and they've told us that digitization of their data is a problem because they still use paper for everything, right? This is actually huge. It's like 96% of all US manufacturing companies are not digitized at all, right? So they use paper for everything.
Mind-blowing.
Phone and paper, right? So we work in that space, and eventually you start to hear a general trend. And when you're talking to these customers that are out there, you start to extrapolate, like, what is it that you really want to, like, what's the value that you would get from this? But oftentimes they don't even know because it's the future. So they're saying, well, if only I could get the data from this historical paper stuff that just sits here, I could probably figure out where I'm being inefficient. They don't know what that means, but they know that they have this data that could, if used differently, would be able to provide value. You hear that a bunch of times. Some people capture notes put it into databases and things like that for us to go and chat with. Like, actually, I talk to my data all the time. Like, when I talk to a customer or talk to a potential somebody who has influence or understands it, I'll actually do a transcription of it. And all I do is I just drop it into ChatGPT or one of the Anthropic, one of them, and basically it just starts to put down the summary of it. Great, that is some value, but it's a free tool. But then you start to ask it questions and prompt it, be like, well, I think they actually meant something more like this. If this was the case, tell me about other things that are happening in the ecosystem. And so it starts to put context around it. Some people won't do any of that. Some people will just, it keeps in their brain. They tell other people. But eventually there gets to be enough in our discussions. So we're like, hey, I'm seeing this. I would like to pursue this idea. Somebody else says, oh, I just talked to somebody. I also want to talk about this because I think this is the value that they have. Once you get to that critical point where we make the decision that this might be worth pursuing and we put somebody on it, now this is where the real stuff happens, where we go to the customer that we've identified and we do record that and we do transcribe that and we do take that information and put it into a series of tools that allow us to create something that's really clear and concise. And then the manual part comes back in. So we could do this just by like typing it out, but because these AI tools can really help to bring these things together really fast, you still need to go in, because ChatGPT doesn't know everything. You need to still go in and line by line figure out what is the real message that we're going with here. It needs to come from our experience. And then based on that experience, now we have some of the data though that we can talk to because we have a whole bunch of information that we've taken verbatim. We can start to then use that to form up the story. After that, everything, we have a lot of data that starts going into it to help us to inform it. But up front, it can be very hard, especially because everybody has competing ideas. But we try to stay very aligned. Like, not everybody gets a say in saying, hey, we're going to move forward with this. Everybody has a say in saying, hey, there's value in this or not.
The information is more about curating, which is still when it comes to, it's a little more art than science. Sometimes you have to have an opinion, but you also need facts. Some people have, I always had a hard time talking about who I work with. And I always say subject matter experts, and subject matter experts either have 20 years of experience in an industry or are a recent graduate that has a vision for something that just kind of, from the hand of God or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so the subject matter expertise can either be from like those earned insights of 20 years of like scientifically building an encyclopedia from a lived experience, or just not knowing, that sort of that learning curve, the Dunning-Kruger. They will encounter, things they don't know, but quite the successful ones drive through it. And so the reason why I bring that up is because to help entrepreneurs, and even for the entrepreneurs themselves, they still have to do this curating, whether it's based on disciplined, fact-based, like, record keeping, or the curating of their own ideas and assembling those. And AI is kind of just changing the process of doing it and helping with little tedious things like, turning unstructured phone call data, statistics, and boiling it down where you can query it. And then even like what you said is, you can actually ask it to extend what you have in your files and go out and seek research and reports and be like, does this look like anything else that's out there?
Yeah.
Or can you corroborate these facts with any big stats or something? It's really, really interesting. Moving on, I think I want to ask about your personal approach to relationship management. You talked about one of your successful ventures is, I think you said Excel partner.
ScaleUp Venture Partners, yeah.
And so correct me or refine my thinking on this, but sounds like you brought a bunch of experts together, mainly from the United States, that wanted to pursue entrepreneurship opportunities, specifically in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so my company is called Community Company. I help folks with thought leadership. And so one part of thought leadership is, and about a community management, is you put out more value and you try to lead your community, but without and only hope that some opportunities come back to you. You're trying to win over hearts and minds, and then when you're ready to make a sale, you've developed enough trust that they believe that you're going to buy from them. And so an extension of creating content, which is the main way that I help people with their community and thought leadership, is actually organizing communities, which is what you did with Excel. And you're also doing this with ScaleUp Labs. So this is your full-time job. How do you successfully manage relationships where it's, a fraction of someone's time?
Yeah. It's managing a network is really, really hard, right? It's, this is from trying to do it, right? It's one thing to get somebody excited when in your initial conversation with them, and even up front. My partner and I, when we first started ScaleUp, we always said we have 6 months for somebody where you could keep them engaged. And if you don't figure out how to add value to them, you're going to lose their attention, right? And 6 months was probably even too much. It's because we weren't, part of it was during COVID, part of it was before COVID, I guess. But it was, if the value that you need to create has to give people reason to come back over and over and over again. The value that we ended up creating, and this took some trial and error on it, was we knew we had a group of people that were interested in venture capital, had never really been involved. They were high net worth individuals. They were experts in their space. They also had some sort of attachment to a certain region. In our case, my co-founder was from Mexico, and I was originally doing this in Poland because my wife is from there, got married there, spent a lot of time there. Great group of technology coming over to the US. But when we switched it over to Latin America, it was a little bit easier, time zones as well as culturally, it was a closer fit to what we're trying to do. You find that there's a lot of people that live in the US that have background in Latin America, would like to see it succeed. It's an underserved market. And outside the US, the capital markets are very tough. And as well as being an entrepreneur is very tough. And so they wanted to be involved and have some sort of connection to it and the ability to see if there was some change as well as potentially get some monetary value out of it. What we found was interesting is when you take those two components to it and then you put some air of exclusivity, it really gets people motivated to be more engaged. And so how do you do that? You want them to get involved, is that we had an extended network of a lot of people, 1,500 people that were part of our network. I would have 150 plus every month coming to some sort of panel or pitch event that we would host virtually as far as away as Australia, through Canada, and all over Latin America, as well as the US. So it was really great, to have people come. We had a much smaller group, which was 80 people that were the higher net worth individuals, and we called them the venture partners. The other was our network, right? All of these people would come, lots of people would come, people would be reaching out all the time because we added value to something that they cared about. And those that were within the venture partner network, even if they didn't invest in a certain deal that we were bringing to the table, we curated information that made them feel like they had a seat at the table, right? And having a seat at the table makes them feel important, feel good about what they're doing, and gives them something to tell all their friends that they're doing, right? And so we learned a lot from that. And even though our network is not quite the same in ScaleUp Labs, because we don't do as much of the pitch events and panels, we do that for we do have accelerators. And so we have some companies that we do these pitch events for, but they're not on a monthly basis anymore. What we found is that people that want to engage with us they're interested, but don't really understand AI. They usually have an interest in one of our sectors, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, or energy. But what it really gives them is a seat at the table of something that is really outside of a few areas in the world, is really just known by ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. And people are terrified of what it's going to mean because the media told them to be terrified of it. But they use it on a day-to-day basis, and something that doesn't have a lot of intrinsic value from a dollar perspective. $20 a month gets you premium, or you can use a free version, right? This is going to become like what ChatGPT is, or what, you know, any of the other LLMs are. They're going to basically be like electricity going forward, right? And people are starting to realize that this is like what exists today, like in their everyday life, is not what everybody's talking about. That's this big scary thing that's coming in the media. So the people who have the ability to interact with us and can provide value to us, we can provide value to them, because now they get to see kind of what's coming. They get to have input. They get a seat at the table, and they're able to use this to provide value throughout the rest of their life, because now they're party to what are the big market shifts that are coming in AI, and they can speak to it, which gives them value in everything that the rest of their life is involved in, because it's a big interest to a lot of people, right? So it brings value to the people that want to engage with us, and we want them at the table. We want to hear from them. We want them to be engaged. We want to give back to them, give them something that provides value to them, and it could be in the form of equity, it could be in cash, it could just be in prestige. They get to sit at the table with us and sit on advisory boards or be a mentor for some of the companies we're investing in or creating.
That's really interesting. I think being able to, so there's so much about community. I find that creating community or creating a network it's so rewarding, but I find that you have to do it in sort of fits and spurts a little bit. And
it's hard. It's very hard.
it's super hard, but it's always so rewarding. And what I find with a lot, there's this tyranny of the spreadsheet. Like, I find that like we're very financialized, especially in business. And the reason why I like startups is because it's impossible. Things are pro forma. And so, but even money managers, even VCs that I've worked with, they're just like, we just want to invest in great companies. When I try to pitch them on the idea of developing an ecosystem or a community or partnering with angels, they don't see the ROI on the effort, on the actual sweat equity that goes into it, because they can't see the direct line to the ROI. And so it's very few and far between. And I actually think in the age of AI, this sort of like psychological relationship developing marketing tactics, which is community, is super important, because most of the other channels are in a lot of flux right now and abstracted. And also the ability to get stuff done is kind of accelerated so much to the point where relationships are something that cannot be automated. Like quite yet.
That is true. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah. That's something we struggle with also is the engagement. Like, that's where I've been working on with one of the schools I went to for my undergrad, and they're doing a lot in technology now, and it's pretty impressive what they've started to put together, and some of the investment that they've gotten from different groups to create things in life sciences. And I'm starting down the path of helping them figure out, how do you bring alumni to the table. And one of the things that I've seen over and over and over again, having graduated from 2 colleges, is that they look at us as a cash machine. They come to us when they want money, and they tell us about all the things that they're doing that will not impact my life. Like, And then they're like, okay, now open up your wallet. And sometimes you give, sometimes you don't. What I wanted to do was put together a network of alumni that get value out of engaging in these new technologies and these new companies and this new IP that's being developed in their alma mater. You can create an unbelievable network that gets value from itself by being involved with it, as well as drive value to the university in the form, and it's not a direct line to ROI. It gives certain like prestige, it gives them certain notoriety, it gives them certain press. Ultimately, the end of it is that you want to get more people that are willing to open up their checkbooks, but you want them to give money because they feel like they're getting value from it, not just that they're a cash machine, right? And so like I've been helping to design this next phase because it excites me, and I'm excited to see what my university created 20 years after I left. And I didn't know it was doing it, right? And then I recently got back with them. So, I'm embarking right now on my next journey of how can I help create an ecosystem where there's not one that's creating the value that I think could be created.
There's a lot of that conversation in Canada right now. The venture has always been fickle in Canada. We came off of incredible investment in the last like 10 years or so to being kind of hit really hard. There's not a lot of risk capital available because of where that money comes from here, and with tariffs and kind of just like what's happening with the economy. And so also there's been the shift where I think a lot of opportunities in deep tech, because the SaaS model of just sort of like a specific, like a database front end, SaaS software is not where alpha is anymore. It's very sad. It's sad. There's still lots of opportunity there, but it's not. AI is fundamentally changing that. So deep tech's an issue, but deep tech brings about. Canada has we publish something like 4% of the world's research papers, but we don't commercialize very well. So there's this triad of academia, businesses understanding the research, and then capital. And so part of the challenge is that there's a little bit of capital that's trying to get it kickstarted, but they're spread too thin understanding each of the opportunities. So you have to tap into industry experts a little bit.
Right. Okay.
And so there's something that there's a really big opportunity to create community around that. And I don't really know what the model is there, but it sounds very similar to at least what you philosophically, like some strengths that you have in business around sort of building large stakeholder groups and ecosystems and things like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a formula at it for it, and there's people that are far better than me. The first time I just like made it up as I went, right? And then I went with things that worked, and it worked. And then we shifted, and I let a lot of those relationships die. And then as we shifted, we realized that we had a different value proposition, so we went and did it again, or are doing it again, I should say. And we're building up our ecosystem there. So I've been through it a few times, and how you communicate and add value. It's a very everybody's motivated by different things, right? And so that's where the larger your group gets, there's two sides to it. One is the larger your group gets, the harder it is to find a common value that will motivate everybody, right? On the other side is that as you go through different iterations and you identify new opportunities, the bigger your group is that's engaged, the more likely you're going to find people that respond to it, right? So you have to, what's really tough is you can start it easily with a few people. You just have to find some people in your network. That's easy. That's the easy part. As soon as you go past a few people, it starts becoming more harder and harder, and you have to get even clearer on your mission and clearer on your vision and how you're going to bring value to the people that are part of the network in order for you to continue to expand it successfully.
It sounds a lot like what you're talking about with the feeling you have as an alumni of your university, where they come with their handout type of thing. And I think Kim Scott, her crucial comment, she's like, the conversation is the relationship. And so if the conversation is constantly gimme, then in the same way with sort of starting with a small group and then expanding out, it's like, if you're just knocking on the door to get someone to do something and they don't get much in return, then you have to balance it out. You have to, that's what the strength of relationships are, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Anyways, so any parting thoughts before we go, sort of open the floor here? It's been a great chat. Really nice to meet you and learn more about what you're up to at ScaleUp Labs.
I mean, I think that, since we're talking about communication, this is, even though, we've put together something that it works, right? Like for now, we're growing, we're trying to grow a lot. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges we have is how do you take it from what was originally just a group of a few people that came together, like the core, we have a big group from our network, et cetera, but the core group that came together to create ScaleUp Labs, it was a small group of people. We can sit around a table all the time and just chat. And that's grown. And when you start doing that, you start to have more and more people. How do you make sure that community grows, the network grows within even your own organization? What makes it even harder in a lab is that when you have multiple business, so right now we have 5 businesses that are currently going, 40 portfolio companies. We have 11 more companies we're working on right now that we're trying to launch. We're trying to average on between 5 and 6 new startups coming out of the lab a year. Plus we have our accelerators. When you have that many different businesses that try to represent different value propositions, as you bring in teams to run them, and as you talk about value proposition, the ability to attract or work with your outside community gets harder. Because now you're no longer a one-to-one relationship. When I was AccelHub Venture Partners, we were saying we invest in underserved markets because there's a huge value arbitrage by investing in a company out of Latin America. We are going to help those startups to come to the US. We want to continue to grow at home. And there's a 4x valuation increase from around in their home country to the US. Clear value proposition, really straightforward. We could find lots of people all day long that care about that. When you start talking about energy, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and then within each of those sectors, you have different values that you're trying to attach. Because if you think about it, the end user in each of these products could be a very different person. It could be the CFO, CTO, CFO. It could be the frontline person. It could be the person that goes out in in Expert Assist, one of our companies that we're putting together now. You're helping new trainees that are providing services out in the field with people who have more information back at home. Each of those interactions and communications is a different value stream on what they care about, what they don't care about. And so being able to finally thread that and put together the ability to bring in people that really care, but also start to tailor it to clusters within it is like really, it becomes much more complex.
It's wild.
So we're still learning. We still screw it up a lot. We try our best. Like we'll set out a newsletter and be like, oh, this is great. This is like solves like, this is what I would want to know. It's really cool. The trends in AI and all this stuff. We send out and get like very, very few people respond to it. Like why is that? Why do we get that? Like no response. And we realize we're talking about something that people know, nobody really understands, or because they don't understand now, they don't care. But if we tailor it to a really specific need, or like if we have a mentors and advisor request for our cohort that's coming in, we're like, these are the companies, this is the value you're going to get from it. You get a huge hit rate. People responding, people filling out forms. I want to be involved. I want to be involved. And it's something that we kind of learn as we go. And so we try to use as much data as possible to back it up. And even that, like we're still trying to decide what data to use because all of us are different. So it's a challenge to grow. But it's a lot of fun, right? It's like we're having a lot of fun doing it. Even when we fail, we're learning. And for us, that's like part of the battle. Is like As long as we're learning and moving forward and creating something else, turning that failure into something else that has value, we feel like we're moving our value forward. Like we're going to get something out of it, even on months where we can't pay ourselves. It's like, those are the months we like double down and get stronger on the revenue generation from like the next company we're going to build out. So it's a great place to be in. It's exciting. It can be very, very stressful, but communication is absolutely critical to what we do.
Where there's heat, there's fire. It's going to be messy just because of it's a bazaar. You set up a marketplace and there's different vendors, different places, and some will close early and some will open up early and some will be busy certain times a year. And the different ventures. So there's this reminds me of a good analogy. This might be a useful analogy for you. There's a Stanford professor, his name's Bob Sutton. He wrote a book called Scaling Up Excellence, but he has his podcast called Friction. It's about organizational behavior. And one of the podcasts, he was talking about hierarchy. So hierarchy of people, because he was talking about cultures that are relatively flat versus ones that are authoritarian. And he's like, you got to be really careful thinking you have a flat culture. And I think that within our realm, you might have a feeling where, or even people, different stakeholders, there might be businesses that have very large sales cycles. There might be ones that try to hit monthly sales cycles and they live within ScaleUp Labs, but do they feel more affinity to the venture and what that priority is? And so his analogy was the way to know your priority is think of this thought experiment. It's like if two people in the company or two priorities had to rush to the bathroom, had to literally rush to the bathroom, who gets to go first? That's where where the hierarchy of your priorities is.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay. No, and I think that's very true and very, very well thought out. It can be a challenge, and it's a balancing act.
So something to consider and balance, and also just kind of accept as a part of this bizarre structure. Like not like bizarre, but like
bazaar
marketplace.
Yeah.
Anyways, thanks so much, Greg.
No problem. Thanks, Quinn.